how's it going, everyone? Thanks for joining me on a new episode of Talking Tracks on the Music Reviewer podcast. My name is Josh, and today, just another episode of the newish segment where I just talk about 10 or so newish tracks on this podcast. But yeah, thanks for stopping by. If you're new to the Music Reviewer podcast, my name's Josh. I'm the host. I'm just a dude that likes talking about music, not much else to it. But anyways, we're talking about a few artists today. Some Alt J, Ghost, Let's Eat Grandma, Snail, Oak, Wallows, Big Thief, Magdelena Bay. So stick around if you want to hear some track reviews, just pretty straightforward thoughts on what I think about some of the tracks. But yeah, and then of course, lately I've been doing the best and worst track of the week condensed, and I will be doing that on this episode as well at the end of the episode. So stick around if you're familiar with best and worst track of the week. If you're new to best and worst track of the week, all it is a segment where I take all new entries onto the Billboard Hot 100, give each a letter grade, except all I'm doing now is just giving you the best and worst track from these specific weeks. So no reviewing each track, just giving you the best and worst and some thoughts on the chart. So for the week of September 25th, we're going to be covering October 9th, October 16th, and also October 2nd. I seem to have skimmed over that week. But yeah, it should be a pretty lengthy episode. That's kind of why I'm doing this, because I also have an album review ready to come out in the next couple days, hopefully. But this is going to be a bit of a track that this is just going to be a bit of a lengthy episode that I'm thinking I will probably just end up launching to the YouTube side of things to start out with, probably, and maybe just keeping it on there. But anyways, once again, thanks for joining me. Enough of that. And then also, I just want to give everyone a bit of an update. I did cover the latest Lil Nas X Montero album. I thought that was a pretty decent album. Thought there were a lot of good songs on there. So yeah, check it out. It's episode 69, the latest episode on the podcast here you can find on YouTube or anywhere you stream this podcast. And then also, I guess the most recent thing prior to that was Talking Tracks episode 4. If you're interested, or if you enjoy this episode of Talking Tracks, check out the other ones. They're all on there. I did upload episode 4 for various reasons to the podcast side. I did cover certain acts: Caribou, Pond, Sleigh Bells, Men I Trust, Mr. Twin Sisters, the Technicolors. All are on there on that episode for some of the most recent songs those artists have dropped. But either way, let's go ahead and get to the gist of this episode so we don't delay it any further. So first track this week is from Alt J. You and Me is the title of the track. It's been a while since we've heard from Alt J. I think it's been a few years at this point, almost 4-ish maybe. I know that album Relaxer didn't draw all that much attention, and I honestly don't remember too much of it, although I thought when I first listened to it, maybe a few years ago, I thought it was good. This is just their latest track. To be honest, it sounds like pretty typical Alt J. And it's just weird to think that this band has been around since the debut album, An Awesome Wave, for about 10 years now almost. But yeah, it has like a trancey, repetitive nature, especially in the chorus, especially with how like the vocals are spaced out. They do have like the signature style of their writing with like the abrupt bridge section. It's nice, and it's true to most Alt J music, kind of having that thing that happens in the bridge. And I do like some of the uncomfortable synth textures or whatever is being used to drive the melodic material on a lot of this track. It's a pretty low-key track, though. It's very subdued, but it's really not all that surprising for an artist like Alt J. So just check it out if you're relatively interested in them. Alright, so next artist is Ghost, Hunter's Moon. Ghost is a metal band that kind of is known for like their theatrics and stage presence. They kind of have this weird theme going on, I think is maybe satanic. I haven't really looked all that into it, and I know I don't really cover much metal on the podcast, but I do listen to it sometimes, and Ghost happens to be one of the artists that I kind of just keep tabs on. This track kind of seems to be a little bit more accessible than maybe some of the earlier Ghost material, even though it's not saying all that much. I like the clean guitar material that's thrown in. It's when it's utilized, it's nice. Kind of like this '80s sort of flair going on here too, with how the composition, is kind of presented. I really dig the heavy and driving bass that peeks through in the mix all throughout the track. But it's pretty cut and dry metal. There is maybe a slight operatic nature. I don't know if operatic's really a word, but it, kind of like it could be part of like this track could be part of a scene in like some metal inspired musical theater play. I know ghost music kind of fits sort of into that, I guess, situation, but this track more so than others. I like the piercing guitar melodies that drive the outro. This probably gets better when the track is sort of ending. And there's some nice crunchy guitar riffs thrown in. But like I said earlier, it's kind of just some pretty straightforward metal. Next band is by the Regrets with the track Monday. This is a band I've kind of heard of here and there. I thought they were maybe... honestly, I'm not too familiar with the discography. I just thought I'd give them a try because I saw that this track was recently released. To me, I kind of got at first that it kind of sounds like a more cleaner produced Haim, a la their first or second album. Some pretty tropey pop, indie pop aesthetics going on, oversimplified guitar riffs that structure the entire track, and the lyrics about Los Angeles. Some thin and cheap sounding percussive elements. Honestly, I'm not too versed in this band. What I kind of got from it is just it sounds very alt nation. Not sure what is all that distinguishable about this act or composition that would help me recognize the band again down the road. It's not a terrible track, just kind of there, and dime a dozen maybe. Let's Eat Grandma, Hall of Mirrors is the next track. Let's Eat Grandma is this fun synthwave, synth pop duo, I believe from the UK, that has been around for a few years now, but I feel like they just haven't really broken into the United States music scene all that much, due to various reasons. I don't know too much about the reception in the UK or in Europe, but I can assume that's maybe a bit, I guess, more present. But yeah, this track is very much so similar to the past music, with it being very synth based and synth popish, and then obviously there's some textured layer synths that drive the track, almost Depeche Mode like, but really I think it kind of has more of like a New Order type of sound to it. Maybe not as colorful as their past tracks either, that seem to stick out to me, but it feels like they're just evolving and maturing, and this track is kind of just exemplifies that. I like the subdued pre-chorus and the tension that's created there in that moment. It's a bit of a subdued track, but it works. The percussion, in my opinion, can use some pop to it. They at least kind of kept like their unique twist, though. There is, like, I believe, an instrumentalist that plays sax. That's one half of this. That's kind of kept here on this track. I like the attitude as the track progresses as well. When we go towards the outro, definitely there's like this conclusive nature that resolves the track quite nicely. And yeah, that's pretty much the most interesting part of the track, though, as we start to get to the end. Yeah, next track by Snail, Ben Franklin. This was literally just released today, the day that I'm recording this. And I'm glad I decided to listen to this and put this on this episode, because this is probably one of the better Snail tracks I've heard overall. I like the more colorful and pop-inspired aesthetic that they went with here. The boomy bass track as well. It kind of goes away from the typical Snail sound with like this raw college rock sort of aesthetic. Definitely more of like a dream pop situation going on here. And I don't know, the bass line is just awesome on this track. It lines up with the melodic material and the vocals at times. The direct synth lines that coat the track all throughout are quite tasteful as well. Nice mechanical nature that really works on this. Yeah, just cool experimentation and I guess different direction here from Snail. Next track by White Oak, Cafe Double Man. This is a band that's obviously been present and doing their thing for a while now. A track that a band I'm sorry that I honestly should have gotten into at some point, because they kind of fall into like this alt rock sort of domain that I was very into in college, and I just never, for whatever reason, bothered with the discography. So honestly, I don't really know much about White Oak's music, and but this is an interesting track. There's a gritty groove that opens up, the song drums and guitar textures can sound a bit washed out, honestly. Probably intentional though. I think they're going for a certain character on here. That definitely is the main theme of the track. But I will say it's the main idea that is presented in the introduction is reiterated quite often. It can make the track a bit static sounding. I guess the sound makes sense when you look into how this duo goes about performing, from what I read. It's an interesting sound that is definitely going for something. I'm just not sure how many people are going to be driven to go to this sort of sound in the vast, saturated world of all indie rock, especially with this act being out as much as, or as long as it has. I feel like the fan base is sort of established at this point. But anyways, interesting track. Next one by Mitski, Working the Knife. This track was good. It actually sounds like it's from like the second Alt J album as it opens up. There's like this mysterious sort of mood created with like the held out synths and colorful percussion. I love the bright keyboard melodies when they're thrown in. It's a bit sparse, but it's nice when that happens. The track kind of just ends faster than it starts. Just when we get to like some groove being established, the track is just kind of wrapping up and we're getting to the best part. It's not bad, just wish it was maybe a bit more elongated or developed. Next one is Wallows, I Don't Want to Talk. I'm pretty sure I might be butchering the title. Either way, it's one of the most, I think it's the most recent Wallows track. I think they're leading up to an album release at some point. And I gotta say, this is probably one of the most disappointing singles I've heard from the band. It kind of sounds at first like I'd Stop the World by Modern English, just with how the guitar riffs are presented. They're a bit reminiscent of that track, and the tempo I think is very similar. Not the most exciting Wallows track I've heard. The track definitely picks up at around the chorus, but we get this sort of bubblegum aesthetic with the direction it takes and the dumb whistling hook that's thrown in. The drum track sounds a bit small in the context of the mix too, maybe a bit too programmed, I'm not sure. And I'm just a bit frustrated by how forgettable this track I think will end up being. After that, Big Thief Change. Another band that's working up to an album, I think at the beginning of next year. I really like the rawness of the recording. I'm digging the slappiness of the drum track. That definitely brings some character to this song. Adrian's voice sounds excellent as expected. More of this stripped down track, honestly. Like lovely vocal harmonies, but it's really like just like some raw drum playing, guitar accompaniment, and Adrian's vocals. The track does develop a little bit. There's a pretty guitar interlude after the first verse, and that accompanying guitar is quite soft, but it's also present. It's nicely balanced. Just not the most in-your-face Big Thief track, probably more similar to like a solo Adrian Linker track or a Buck Meek track. And then after that, Magdelena Bay, Hysterical Us. This is kind of like a newer indie pop act that just released their debut album, I believe. That is kind of generating critical acclaim and buzz. I'm thinking this is a pretty solid track. It's definitely not bad. I like the upbeat indie pop, slight funk flavor that's incorporated. The vocals remind me a bit of like the front woman from Tennis. Nice big sound when the chorus hits with the boomy drums, the bright piano textures. Lovely transitions into the second chorus as well. Nice deep and boomy bass line that kind of just guides everything throughout the chorus material. It's a bit too disco overkill flavor, past a certain point. Also, a nice dreamy charm is on here. I'd say that's probably the main selling point. But yeah, it's just very straightforward indie pop at the end of the day. But yeah, not bad. And that's the 10 tracks we have on this episode of Talking Tracks. Thanks for joining me on this episode. We are not done though. If you want to stick around, we have a lot of about 8 or so tracks to cover for Best and Worst Track of the Week, and we will go into that right now with the Best and Worst Track of the Week of September 25th. This week was probably the most condensed, straightforward week. There was some Ed Sheeran on here. Chloe from Chloe and Halle. I thought that her track was called Have Mercy was nice as well. But anyways, I didn't really have too much thoughts about this week other than there was like a Willow track with some artist called The Anxiety, or that's the band that she's in. Some track ended up charting with her that I thought was interesting. But anyways, worst track of the week for this week is LALISA by Lisa. This is as a solo artist from, I believe, the band Blackpink, which is a K-pop act. Yeah, it's a pretty undistinguished. This track is pretty undistinguishable in like the context of K-pop. It's slightly outdated pop aesthetic going on here, post club boom. The bridge is short-lived, but probably the most interesting part of the track. It's there's a nice breakdown on the tail end. The hooky chorus material doesn't really hook me that much. It just ends up being kind of obnoxious and distracting. And then also there's like this kind of distracting accompanying synth melody that is very repetitive as well. The rapping sounds awfully like Nicki Minaj too, like the flow and everything. But yeah, that's worst track of the week. LALISA by Lisa, I believe that's the name of the artist. Range Brothers by Baby Keem and Kendrick Lamar, best track of the week. This probably won by default. This was kind of like a meme too with the top of the morning thing. So yeah, this is kind of how old at this point this track has. This track is, but this is from Best and Worst Track of the Week of September 25th. I'm really digging the grittiness and distorted bass hits on this track. The beat switches are all quite nice as well. The synth string structuring, the second instrumental are interesting, and Keem's ability to somewhat be melodic over this is quite interesting as well. I think it pretty much displays his technical chops. The drum track has a lot of texture and isn't distracting. The chemistry between Kendrick and Keem trading bars is nice. There's like a conversational moment, and the ad-libs are kind of funny and well-timed. And of course, let's get this shit. Yeah, good track. And yeah, that's for the week of September 25th. And just before we get to the other weeks, I kind of meant to talk about some highlights on the chart, which I guess make more sense to do now that we covered like the older week that came first. So some highlights: Stay by Justin Bieber and Kid Laroi, still at number 1. I guess it's doing well on radio. Fancy Like by Walker Hayes. I guess at this point I'm not surprised what this country amounts to, and the cheapness that we sort of just create in our society. But yeah, Fancy Like by Walker Hayes is the number 3 song in the United States right now. We really like Applebee's. Hey, I will say I did go there the other day, and the food wasn't too bad, so I'm contributing to it, I guess. Levitating has been on the chart by Dua Lipa for over a year now. It's currently at number 8, so pretty strong single by her. Although I don't know, has it gone to number 1? My Universe by BTS and Coldplay, which I guess was number 1 last week, down to number 12. If I Didn't Love You by Carrie Underwood and Jason Aldean up to number 19. Which I like that track. I think they got best track of the week a couple months ago. And I'm kind of surprised how high it's gotten. Same thing with Memory I Don't Miss with Lee Brice. Country's kind of having a resurgence right now. Some of the tracks are pretty high. I guess Walker Hayes is kind of to thank for that. Baddest by Young Blue and Chris Brown up to 56. I thought this track was better than a lot of people may have thought it was. And I guess it's kind of climbing up a little bit. Woman by Doja Cat up to 62. Her album's a bit old now. Not sure why this track is barely just climbing. Ghost of You by Justin Bieber for some reason re-entered. I'm not sure why. Sand in My Boots by Morgan Wallen. Morgan Wallen. That's his name. The dude that had the scandal with the that word. Anyways, he re-entered, and I think this track might be the next big hit for him for some reason, because we just kind of forgot about everything. Things a Man Ought to Know by Lainey Wilson is out of the chart. Rumors by Lizzo and Cardi B out. I'm sorry. I wasn't a fan of that track, and there's a lot of Lizzo and Cardi B stands out there, but I told you so. I don't really know what I said about this track, but it's out already. For Tonight by Giveon. This track is, I'll talk about it here in a second, I think, but yeah, out of the chart already. Much of the Young Boy Never Broke Again album bomb that dropped a couple weeks ago out. Arcade by Duncan Lawrence kind of had this moment, but it's out as well. And then also Don't Go Yet by Camila Cabello, which I think was another worst track of the week, is out. A lackluster song. Not too surprised. Anyways, let's go back to best and worst track of the week. For October 2nd. This was an interesting week. This was an album bomb, I believe. Lil Nas X, this is his week. And just a reminder, the review for that album is up on the podcast if anyone wants to hear my thoughts on it. But Worst Track of the Week ended up being Same Boat by Zach Brown Band. To be honest, this track isn't awful. It kind of lost by default, though, because it just wasn't as good as any of the Lil Nas X tracks that were charting from his album. And this is kind of just sounds like a slightly different rendition of Chicken Fried, their breakout hit from, at this point, over 15 years ago, maybe even less, slightly less. Just with their typical, just kind of blended with their typical tropical, relaxed flair that they kind of adopted. Some of the guitar riffs are a bit hooky, but the damn tropical sort of aesthetic that is just kind of like smothered on this just ruins the track for me. It just kind of cheapens it. I've also just heard Zach Brown Band do way better than this. Even their weird move towards like a pop album they did a couple years ago was at least more interesting than this, in my opinion. This is kind of just like a Luke Bryan track, honestly. And they also add a terrible whistle solo that could have easily just been a generic guitar solo, but they went with the whistle instead. So that was kind of the nail in the coffin there. Yeah, so worst track of the week goes to them with the track Same Boat. Best track of the week, though, was from the Lil Nas X album. With Lost in the Citadel, I really like this track. Probably one of my favorite tracks from the album. Not too much to say about it other than there's like some Postal Service flavor on here to start out with, like how the drum machine and the synth combo interact. It's a vocal highlight for Lil Nas X, probably one of the better vocal performances I've heard from him. An upbeat pop rock flavor. I like the driving rhythmic strumming that's on the instrumentals. The drum track could be a bit more punchy in my opinion, but the accompanying lead guitar melodies that color the chorus are quite nice and kind of just make the track nice altogether. Best track of the week goes to Lil Nas X for that week of October 2nd. For the week of October 9th, this one was a headache to get through because it was a Young Boy Never Broke Again album bomb. And I'm not to make myself sound super important, but it's part of the reason I stopped doing best and worst track of the week every week was because of the damn mid-tier rap album bombs that were inevitable. But just having to talk about every single track on like a 20 plus song album where every single track is just so inconsequential for the most part and so redundant at times too. This album is just kind of a good example of my frustration. But anyways, worst track of the week is For Tonight by Giveon. I have not been too big on this artist. To me, they're just kind of copying Sam Smith's Homework. And this track is a huge copying Sam Smith's Homework. It's a Stay With Me ripoff for sure. Typical boring piano ballad with an uninteresting composition that just serves to not interfere with the overbearing vocalist. Which here, Giveon is not a bad singer, but I don't want to hear Giveon crooning, for 4 minutes. Also, the percussion sounds like a trash can being hit or just some trash being hit. Just so slow and lethargic. The track is just really uninteresting and bland. They try to add textures with like some synth strings at some point, but it doesn't really help all that too much. Also, there's some cheap snaps thrown in for auxiliary percussion. They might as well have just kept the trash can stuff going on. And then actually the best track of the week was kind of a bit surprising. This was the Diamond in the Rough, if you will say, for this week. Your Heart by Joyner Lucas and J. Cole. Honestly, if J. Cole was not the feature on this track would probably not have been best track of the week. But J. Cole just killed it on his verse. He paints the story so well with how a relationship can crumble and karma and whatnot. There's some nice crisp percussion textures in the beat. Nice flow coming from J. Cole on the feature. Joyner, this is probably the best Joyner Lucas track I've heard. The track opens up with like a hooky melodic motif that just develops as the verses go on, and Joyner Lucas holds his own. Some nice punchy and weighty bass hits as well. It's just a solid rap R&B cut, so I thought this was best track of the week. And then finally for the week of October 16th, this was a Meek Mill album bomb, I guess. This one was pretty straightforward though. I kind of picked out the tracks quite easily. Whiskey and Rain, by Michael Ray. Worst track of the week. It is, I think, the only country track this week. But yeah, not a good week for country with this one. The track opens up decently. However, it's kind of obviously going for like this 90s, 2000s country revival. Kind of like what the band Midland did with the drinking problem and the other hit that they had a couple years ago. This is very much so, trying to do that same thing. There's a lot of country elements from the track that I guess you would say correlate directly to like what's presented on a track like Drinking Problem. The deeper vocal range, the groove, the tempo. Either way, it's not a better song than Drinking Problem. It's kind of just executed well, but that's it. The vocal harmonies are nice. The track is just really mild. It goes down smooth, but so does Miller Lite. Instrumental moments don't pop as much as I'd like to hear them. The reiteration of the chorus over and over does not help either. So yeah, it's just kind of a very boring, static country track. Here's a track that I found. This is probably the most interesting best and worst track of the week I've probably ever covered. Esta Danada by Ivan Cornejo, a Mexican-American artist, but I think he's mainly based out of Mexico now. This is kind of unique circumstance because this is definitely in the vein of being like regional Mexican music that comes from Mexico and usually does not intertwine at all with the Hot 100, with like the corrido aesthetic, which are usually just sad, romantic, thematic tracks that are about heartbreak and stuff. Obviously sung in the Spanish language. But yeah, it's surprising that I found this on the Hot 100. It's probably one of the most original tracks I've heard in a while. The slapped bass line or the guitarrón, maybe, it might be a bass guitar. It just gives the track a lot of character. It's technically played quite nicely. Like, even though at times rhythmically it might not make sense, that's kind of just how the style usually does things. It's not meant to be the most pristine, perfect sounding style of music. Lots of different elements being put on here. The corrido music, the desert rock psychiness to it, the bedroom pop aesthetic, maybe like some slight emo. There's just a lot of interesting elements blending, and to me, I want to say that it's a unique style. I don't know if this is a scene that is coming up because I'm just not too versed in what Latin American kids are listening to. But anyways, I do like what I'm hearing here. The steel guitar even is very bachata, but the track does not sound bachata at all. There's also a darky dreaminess to this that just gives the track such unique character. It's a very cool track, somehow manages to sound quite poppy too. I will say there has been criticisms I've heard of like the production, but this track, like I was saying earlier, this style is not meant to be the most pristine, glimmering, perfectly constructed form of music. It's definitely supposed to sound raw and rough. I just thought this was an interesting way of going about it. So I get best track of the week to Ivan Cornejo with this Esta Danada. Yeah, that's pretty much the conclusion of this episode. Thanks for sticking around if you hung around this long. If you dug what you heard, like and subscribe on YouTube. Leave a comment, good or bad. Also, I don't know. Yeah, the next album review should be down. Maybe it might be out before this goes live. We'll see. But anyways, once again, thanks for tuning in. I'm the music reviewer, and subscribe on your preferred listening service too. Anyways, I'll see you guys later.